And the plagues of the book are waiting for Paul, and he's probably already experiencing them in hell. This is another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. Find other lessons in this series as well as my other videos on the Yalak Emet channel on YouTube, or find me as Yalak Emet and Rethinking the Torah on Twitter and Patreon as well. The lesson today is number 198, titled The Perfect Way. And I will read from Acts chapter 18, verse 24 to 26. And a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man was instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in the Spirit, he spake and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. Right away there, I just want to introduce to you that if he knows only the baptism of John, why is he so fervent in the Spirit and being mighty in his teaching? How can an Israelite who knows the Torah of Moses be mighty in the Spirit? How can an Israelite who does not know the Torah of Moses know how to be mighty in the Spirit, knowing only the baptism of John or only new teachings? Because the power of the Spirit is going to be expressed based on the teachings of the Torah of Moses, or the Torah of the Lord given through Moses. Because the power is going to be based on the connection to the Torah truth that you already have, not the new way or only the baptism of John or a New Testament. Because the one who has the knowledge of the Torah can then have access to the power. So if he does not have a connection to the Most High properly through the Torah and only knows new things, he don't have no power and might from God. Which is why the Israelite will say that the Christians have it wrong, and they laugh and mock the teachings of the Christians because it's only New Testament based. They don't get into the Torah, and they even try to make fun of some of the deceptive healing miracle crusades of the Christian healers who have been found to be fake, because they're saying, see, God is not with them because they are not even Torah based. They're just going straight with New Testament stuff. So they're really saying that without the Torah foundation, you're not going to have any power of God. Yet this man knew only the baptism of John. And verse 26, and he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, whom when Aquila and Priscilla had heard, they took him unto them and expounded unto him the way of God more perfectly. Why? Because he was out of place in the synagogue teaching only new things, when the Torah already said through the prophets, my people have chosen a way not cast up. So he's dealing with new things, knowing only the baptism of John, so he does not know the Torah way. So he was out of line and out of place teaching new things in the synagogue, which should be basically the picture of an old place or an old doctrinal system dealing with Moses or the 613 commandments, which does not teach Calvary, those set of 613. So because when they heard this, they're like, no, this guy is out to lunch. So they took the man and taught him the way of God more perfectly, which was who was a man who was being, in verse 25, fervent in the spirit, and who the New Testament said taught diligently the things of the Lord. How can the New Testament say, the writers they say, that he taught the stuff diligently? Because when you click on the word diligently, akribos from the Greek, G199 in your Strong's Concordance, it says it means exactly, accurately. So the New Testament is telling you that this man, Apollos, taught the word or the truth of God. And when you deal with the word of God, it then means the Torah of God. So the New Testament writers are lying to you by telling you that this man, through the power of the New Testament Spirit, taught the word of God in the synagogue exactly or accurately. He taught the Torah exactly or accurately. It was a lie, because all he knew was some new doctrine of baptism of John. In other words, he knew Calvary message. But the New Testament is telling you that he taught the truth of God perfectly. But the people who knew something about the old days of Moses and of the children of Israel took him away right away, pretty much, and expounded. In other words, when you look at this Greek word now, G1620, I don't know how to say these words, ektithemi, if I'm saying it correctly, they expounded to him means they placed or set out. Picture like a desk, and you're bringing someone is and you're teaching them some real nice course, and you're getting in depth, and you're laying out and you're spreading out all your concordances and your lexicons and your dictionaries and all your kinds of books and few different Bibles, and you're getting out your Greek and Hebrew Bible, and you're getting out 5 other books and 10 over there in a stack waiting to be displayed on the table. You're setting it out, and you're reading to them from books that they've never heard of and authors they've never heard of. They taught him or placed or set out the truth more perfectly. So placed or set out, that's what expounded means. Put outside, expose. So they're exposing something to him. So they're using strong language here to let you know that this man had no light of the knowledge of the Torah. He just got a New Testament doctrine, because this man was not an Israelite sent by God. So they exhibited the truth unto him. But even they were corrupt in their knowledge as well. But at least they were trying. So they set forth, declared, and so on. So this is really kind of strange. They taught him the way of God more perfectly. Now, when you deal with the way of God more perfectly, what it's really saying to you is that there was so much emphasis on the New Testament Calvary Holy Ghost doctrine in the New Testament and in the book of Acts and so on, that something was missing, so they had to try to do something to make it more perfectly, to try to align it with Old Testament stuff again. Because that's the only way the whole thing, deception, could be passed off in the New Testament, right? But the Torah way of God could only be taught perfectly with the 613 commandments, and absolutely no word like Calvary or Golgotha is in the 613 commandments. So if they're pulling this guy aside, they're saying, if you're going to teach this Calvary stuff, at least know some stuff about the Torah of Moses. Let's run now to Acts chapter 22 and verse 3. I am verily a man which am a Jew, so this is Paul talking now, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. And we know that when it comes to Paul, he at least knew the Torah, right? And he was fighting against the Hebrews, so-called Christians at the time, because it was letting us know in the New Testament that he was fighting them down because they were coming in with this new Calvary stuff, and it's like, no, but Moses didn't teach that and whatever, right? Israel didn't deal with that, so he was killing the Christians, who they call Christians, but according to the Israelite view, they were Israelites that were being attacked and so on and killed by Paul. So what Paul is saying here is that he knew the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. So before he accepted Jesus from this experience on the road to Damascus, his perfect knowledge of the law of the fathers was strictly Torah based. So that means that Paul did not find Calvary until he got the deception that turned him over. And as many of the teachings of views out there say, that Paul sold out to the Romans, and that's when he took on the Calvary message. But before he did that selling out to the Romans to save his life, he was not a Calvary pusher. That's why he was fighting the Christians, carrying letters of authority to arrest the Christians, or basically the Israelites, who were Christ-centered with this new message of Calvary. Because his Torah knowledge did not let him accept Calvary. But when he had to sell out to the Romans to save his life, then he told Calvary. So Paul did not reteach the perfect manner, but he added Calvary. He added Calvary after the Damascus experience that they made up. So if he's teaching it perfectly, this Apollos, how did he teach Calvary, the baptism of John? Or even how did Paul start teaching that, Calvary, when before he was killing the Israelites for teaching Calvary, and now he starts to teach Calvary after Damascus experience and after selling out to the Romans? How did Paul begin to teach Calvary? Because he sold out. And by writing now about Calvary, whereas he was killing them for teaching Calvary and speaking about Calvary in the first place, is telling you that Paul was adding something unto the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. It was perfect because Torah cannot be anything other than perfect. They teach us in the Torah worldview. So if Paul was teaching according to and killing the disciples of Jesus according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, then for him to later be writing about Calvary and spreading the message of Calvary means that he was now adding on something to the perfect law of the fathers. He was adding on Calvary to the perfect law of the fathers. So then Paul went astray heavily as well. Now, let's get some more verses for you to think about here. Revelations chapter 22 and verse 18. For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book. If any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. He could not have been talking about adding unto what's written in the New Testament, because the New Testament was not written at the time when these things were being experienced right here, when John was getting all this stuff through Jesus in the revelation of Jesus Christ. The New Testament was not yet released. So then, what it really means, because John is receiving these revelations through Jesus Christ. So while he is receiving it and getting this word here that anybody who adds unto this book will be cursed, it could not have been talking about the New Testament book, because the New Testament book was not written at the time when John was getting this revelation from Jesus. So this book would mean the book of the Torah, the book of the 613 commandments. So the understanding would be from Revelation 22:18, any man who adds unto this book of the Old Testament or of the Torah, these things shall God add unto him, the plagues and so on, the curses. So for Paul to come now and be teaching like Apollos the way of God, and both of them calling it perfectly, is a lie. It's a deception. Paul joined into the deception that Apollos participated in, who was himself, Apollos, teaching a perfect manner by knowing only the baptism of John. That's crazy, because you cannot teach the perfect manner of the law by knowing only the baptism of John, because the baptism of John was not something that the Israelites taught when they taught the Torah of Moses, because the baptism of John was not something that the Israelites taught when they taught the Torah of Moses before the Israelite kingdom went down. So Paul joined in the deception of Calvary. And the plagues of the book are waiting for Paul, and he's probably already experiencing them in hell. Now, that New Testament adding curses to anyone who adds to the book is really just taken from the Old Testament authority in the biblical worldview from places like Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2, which was always one of my favorite verses. I'm going to read it here for you. Deuteronomy 4 and verse 2. It says here, ye shall not add unto the word. So the Most High just gave them his Torah, right? And they just recently left Egyptian bondage. Ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it. So don't change it in any way. Don't make it look more by adding, like Paul did, and writing of it in his Pauline epistles. And don't even diminish by taking out anything. So you neither shall ye diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did. In other words, this Torah is just about things that happened then. You guys saw and could verify activity from your God back then. So nothing should be added unto this. So if somebody is seeing a man die on Calvary later in the future, that's not what God is talking about. God is not talking about those Calvary experiences or Gethsemane experiences being a part of the commandments and a part of the prophecies. So he's saying don't add anything unto it. So when Paul writes of a Calvary being true, a Calvary sacrifice, Paul is adding unto the word, and by so doing, he's not only breaking the Torah commandment that says you shall not add unto it by adding Calvary in his writings to the back of the book of the Torah, Old Testament, but he is also diminishing by adding his New Testament views. He is also diminishing the Torah. Why? Because to add unto the Torah things that God did not say to the Israelites is to diminish the instruction that was given to the Israelites, because it diminishes the adherence to the Torah, to the 613. To add something new is to diminish or take away from the old. Paul offended on both counts. Now, look again now in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2. Ye shall not add unto the word. So look at the Hebrew word for add, which is H3254 from your Strong's Concordance. It is yasaf. Hebrew word yasaf. It means to add, increase, do again. So what's Calvary come doing again? Like these Israelites and Christians teaching, the sins of Israel wasn't forgiven or removed in Old Testament by the sacrificial sacrifices, the animals, but was only rolled back until Calvary. Both Christians and Hebrews teach that, but that is wrong. That is adding unto the understanding and the word of the Torah. It is adding, right? But it says you do not add anything unto it. So they're adding, right? They're adding something unto it. So it means to add, to increase, to do again. So Calvary is just doing again the sacrifices of the old, which the Most High complains, saying, stop doing it. But they did it again and in greater manner at Calvary. So do not add unto the word that I give you. Do not increase the word by giving more teachings, like the New Testament teachings. Do not join oneself, like Paul joined himself to the disciples he was killing, who were teaching Calvary. He joined himself onto their group and started teaching Calvary as well. Do not join anything unto. So do not add unto the word means do not join anything unto it, like they joined a New Testament unto the back of the book. But the Most High said, do not add unto, do not increase, or do not join on anything unto the word that I have given unto you this day. That's what the teaching should be. So the New Testament is fake and Calvary is a deception from a Torah worldview. So an Israelite standing in the New Testament land of Israel here in the Torah, thousands of years, 100 years, 200, 500, 600, 700, 800, 1,000 years, like in David's time, a long time before Christ. That Israelite looking upon a New Testament book or doctrine, if it were to have been created back then would have said, this is a deception. This is a deceptive book, and they would have struck out against it. The prophets would have spoke out against it and said, a new book has crept up with a new teaching. But that is not the teaching that the Most High gave to our father Moses upon the mountain of Sinai. And he gave the teachings there at Sinai and said, do not add anything unto it. These Calvary bleeding Gethsemane experience is not in the teachings of Moses. So the Israelites way back then would have hit out against it and said, this is wrong. Now, two more verses here. Let's look now at Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 22 to show you that Paul was adding stuff and that Apollos only knew the new stuff. Deuteronomy 5:22, these words the Lord spake unto all your assembly. See that? Line upon line, like Isaiah 28. Think about verse 10 or so. Precept upon precept. He spake unto all your assembly in the mount. All, so he's not leaving out anybody. Out of the midst of the fire. So if he's speaking unto all the assembly, nobody could come and saying, oh, but we got a message over here that said something different. He spoke to everybody, all your assembly in the mount, out of the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick darkness. Means he speaks it in a way that no one can recreate it. Nobody can recreate that environment in fire and cloud and so on coming from out of heaven up on a mountain. Nobody can recreate that. So nobody like Paul can come and recreate it with a new teaching saying, oh, I wrote this stuff in prison from you and sending it out to the church and this is the word of God. No. If Paul was getting that stuff from God, it should have been coming out of an experience in the midst of fire and cloud and thick darkness. But we know that kind of experience only happened at Sinai, not in New Testament times. So out of the thick darkness with a great voice, and he added no more. So when Paul was adding stuff in the Pauline epistles and general epistles of the New Testament, Paul was adding unto it, and he is going to get his damnation in the lake of fire, and all the plagues of the book will be added unto Paul and unto the people that helped him to pull off this New Testament deception or this new doctrinal deception. And he wrote them in 2 tables of stone. He's being specific now, saying 2 tables. He's letting you know that even the stuff was counted and numbered. That's why they're counting 613 commandments. Everything was counted and numbered to let you know that if you see someone with a 3rd or a 4th tablet, this is wrong, because if 200 years later somebody says, oh, there was a 4th tablet that we found that was lost, they'll be like, no, because all our ancestors were there at the foot of that mountain, and they all agreed that there were only 2 stones, 2 stone tablets. So when you're coming with extra teachings about Calvary on this 4th stone that was found, and that prophets prophesied about this, it is a lie, and you should be destroyed out of Israel or cut off. So he delivered them upon 2 tables of stone and delivered them unto me. So nothing new should be added. Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. God, who at sundry times, and this is a lot of deception that they used in the early days when I was young in the Christian church in Jamaica, and they still do it today. God, who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets. So God said, don't add any new things. Basically, don't add anything new to what I passed on to you through my prophets back here, this day that I spoke unto you. But the New Testament people now is telling you, like Paul and the others, and Apollos and Peter and all them on the day of Pentecost and everywhere else, these New Testament people are telling you that God spoke in times past through his prophets, but now speaks unto us through somebody new, through his son Jesus. It's a deception. Because the Torah lets you know that God isn't going to speak through any new people because the word has been sealed and set in stone. But they said that God did an old time stuff and he spake in times past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds. It is a complete deception and a divine lie from Paul, because he's saying that God spake through the prophets, but now he's speaking through his son Jesus. That's a deception. So what he's trying to let you know is that God spake through Moses and all the others, but now listen to some new teachers now in this New Testament time. So the New Testament, this New Testament fake lesson is showing that the perfect way that the Torah spoke of was vehemently rejected by the storm of Golgotha that decimated the Torah that was in the mind of the Hebrews in that time of the Calvary era. The perfect way cannot include Calvary, as the Torah God never told Moses to teach this death on wood salvation. And people believe in that death on wood so much that they're wearing even the wood on a chain around their neck. These people are deceived. Acts chapter 24. Acts chapter 24 verse 14 to 16. Paul did not believe that it was sin to add Calvary to the Torah. So listen to it. Acts 24. But this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. And I have hope toward God, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. And herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men. It's a lie. How can his conscience be void of offense toward God when he is teaching something that is new, that was not in the Torah? He said it himself in verse 14. I confess unto thee that after the way which they call heresy, who can call it heresy but the people who knew the old way or the Torah? They call this new teaching heresy because he added on the Christ doctrine unto it. So they call it heresy. And he said, I confess unto thee that the way that they're calling heresy, in other words, the New Testament Calvary way, so worship I God. So he worshiped God according to this new Calvary way and confessed that yes, it is heresy. So Paul did not consider it a problem to reject the Torah. And he was bold with this rejection of the Torah by adding unto the Torah the New Testament teachings, when the word said, do not add unto these words that I command you this day, from Deuteronomy 4 and verse 2. Okay, let's read from Isaiah 5 verse 24. Therefore, as the fire devoureth the stubble, and the flame consumeth the chaff, so their root shall be as rottenness, and their blossom shall go up as dust, because they have cast away the law of the Lord of hosts, and despise the word of the Holy One. See, to add or to diminish is to cast away and to despise the word. All right? That's exactly what's happening. And the cast away means to reject, to despise, to refuse. Right? So they're refusing to go only by the word that was given at Sinai, and instead they added new stuff unto it. Isaiah 37 verse 19. And have cast their gods into the fire, for they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone, like the wood of Calvary. Therefore they have destroyed them. So this Jesus or death, resurrection, and salvation of Calvary is built around wood that many still wear around their necks today, because they have cast away the Torah of the Lord. Isaiah 25 verse 7, and he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over the nations. Just like this message of this Calvary has been spread over all nations of the earth, But the prophet here is saying that in the end, the veil will be lifted and it will be destroyed out of the mountain of deception, the high place that Jesus is set upon and Calvary is set upon. It is a covering that's cast over all people, and it will be a veil that is removed, that has been spread over all nations, and the people will begin to see in the end that this was a deception. Jeremiah 18 verse 15, because my people have forgotten me, because they have learned new teachings, they have burnt incense to vanity, and they have caused them to stumble in their ways. Right? Because they got away from the perfect way. So they have stumbled in their ways from the ancient paths. Calvary was not ancient. Calvary was not ancient to the Israelite that was looking upon a man supposedly dying upon a cross. It would have been a new way, a new teaching. But they have stumbled in their ways, the prophet saying, from the ancient paths to walk in paths in a way not cast up. That's not the perfect way. It's a way not cast up that the Israelites never knew before. Because of the New Testament edition, many Israelites today, and even back then, aggravated the Most High when 2,000 years ago they accepted a new way, or a New Testament way. But the Torah said not to have anything to do with a new way. Final verse to read to close us out, talking about this new way deception. From Jeremiah chapter 6 and verse 16. Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways. You see the precept upon precept, line upon line. Stand ye in the ways and see and ask for the old paths. Nothing new at Calvary, that God's doing a new thing through Christ. But see and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way? And walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk therein. Why? Because you got people like Paul saying, God, who in sundry times spoke by his prophets, now speaks a new message through Jesus Christ at Calvary. But the Torah here is telling you that the prophet has said that you should ask for the old paths. And they said, we will not walk therein. Why? Because they chose to go into new churches started by Apostle Paul and Peter and the others. This is not the perfect way of the Torah. The New Testament is fake. Find me again on the Yalak Emet channel on YouTube or on Twitter and Patreon. Happy studying.